So, a little while ago, I got a chance to preview a game called Generation Zero for one of the sites that I occasionally write for. While I enjoyed my time with the game, I wasn't the one who got to eventually review it, and the rest of the gaming media, well, they weren't big fans. With all of these coronavirus lockdown sales going on the different storefronts, I saw that the PS4 version of Generation Zero was on sale for a reasonable price the other day, so I decided to finally pick it up and give it a go. At the time, I was pretty aware that it had a multiplayer focus, and I was even more aware that reviews talked about all the terrible bugs and glitches, the multiplayer that doesn't really work, and the fact that robots can spot you from a fucking mile away. Despite this, I decided that the retro 80s aesthetic and the solitary trekking through woods being hounded by terrifying robots was worth trying. So I did. And there are a couple of questions I feel obligated to try and answer. Number 1, is it possible to play through Generation Zero on your own? And number 2, is it actually worth doing that, even if it is possible? Like I said before, Generation Zero is a co-op focused game. Basically, you're supposed to jump feet first in with 3 friends to take on the robots together. Since I only have one friend and he doesn't have a PS4, I decided that the best bet would be to just set the difficulty to the lowest setting and try my best to struggle through it. You boot up the game coming home from an island party weekend as an 80s Swedish teenager, basically meaning that you're either a jock, a punk, or any other flavour of generic 80s character that you want. Not that it matters, since all this does is change your starting costume, and that gets thrown out of the window pretty quickly. Plus, you basically never see it if you're playing solo. Exploring the wilderness on your own is actually pretty interesting. The game is supposed to feel very isolationary, hence the lack of any sorts of, NPCs or anything. That works well enough in 4-player co-op, I would imagine, but even better when you're creeping through the woods completely on your own. In the starting areas, coming across robots is pretty simple. You basically get 2 kinds. These little dog things and kind of flying drone what's-its. Both of these kinds can very easily be taken down with a few well-placed handgun bullets. The drones are just straight up weak, but the dogs have these gas tanks on their backs which make them super easy to deal with, assuming that you can aim straight. For the first few hours, you're basically just creeping around the Swedish countryside, scavenging through bins, picking up more ammo than a human would reasonably be able to carry, and following the arrows on your compass, all of which is completely doable on your own. There's lots of ground cover, but honestly I feel like trying to do it with 4 people would be more annoying, not less annoying. As you spend your early days scavenging, you need to look out for a few items. Basically, there is no point to field radios. They're intended to allow you to create spawn points for other players so that they can fast travel to join you without needing to go to a safe house. Obviously, these are completely pointless in solo play, so ditch them to save yourself some carry capacity. You probably also don't need most of these attraction items. You're solo after all, and these are mostly used to set up team ambushes. Still, keep some flares on you or something because they can occasionally be quite useful. Other than that, scavenging works quite well as long as you prioritise what you're carrying. If you make sure to pick up all the healing items and ammo, and dump almost everything else, then you're probably going to be good. Combat, while doable at first, quickly gets pretty overwhelming. Even as you gain 5 or 6 guns and get more kitted out than Army of 2, your enemies get stronger and quicker. You very quickly discover these sort of bipedal loader things like the Matrix, but they're not really an issue. Even with several of them, quick use of healing items and cover can make them manageable. It's these fucking harvester things which are the real problem. These giant assholes are clearly intended for divide and conquer shit, but on your own they're nearly unbeatable. That is, until you realise that almost any inside space is completely impenetrable if you use it correctly. You see, these advanced robots that manage to destroy an entire nation, or at least one large region's worth of armed force and civilian population, can be taken down by their one key weakness: doors. These fuckers cannot get through a door, no matter how big or, well, small they are. All you have to do is load yourself up on ammo and healing items, then lock yourself in a little room and use the windows to take pot shots. I took down several of these giant fuckers using this method, but it does have its drawbacks. There was this one time in an Air Force base that was the most drawn out thing I have ever experienced in my entire life. I spent about 20 minutes fighting off enemies, all because I just wanted to be able to take my bike with me on the journey to this far off waypoint. Once I was inside this building, I was basically trapped. It started out with a few of the normal bipedal things. Not a problem, just, bang bang, shoot the gas tanks, dead as fuck. But then, the loud fight drew a crowd. Eventually, I had 3 giant harvester robots just pounding at the building I was in. I used almost all of my healing items and all of my ammo, and I had to lock all the doors and sneak up to windows to take these assholes down. But you know what? I fucking got him. I do have to admit, there was this one moment towards the end where a flamethrower wielding prick nearly had me in tears since he could set the entire room on fire or fill it with deadly gas. I nearly gave in, but using some advanced tactics known as shooting that cunt in the face, I managed to take him down. Honestly, the worst enemies in the game aren't any of these giant killing robots. It's these little spider-like fuckers. They constantly swarm you and are almost impossible to hit. If you had some sort of melee option, it might not be so bad, but as far as I can tell, you don't. Your only option is to sit there and keep firing wildly until they stop moving, or just explode on their own for some reason. The point is, even the hardest situations are dealable with in solo play, as long as you take your time in all the towns, and occasionally jump back into places you've already visited to strip them of resources, once they've had a chance to respawn. Now, the real question. Would you even want to solo play Generation Zero? So, I've talked a lot about whether it's possible to play Generation Zero on your own, which is technically, yes it is. But realistically, is it worth putting in all of that effort? That question is a bit harder to answer. When I first heard about Generation Zero, I was drawn to the aesthetic. It seemed very Tales from the Loop, and I kind of assumed that the story and world would very much be based on that. Honestly, I was coming at this game looking for a strong narrative. Now, by that I don't mean a really complicated narrative that's always in your face with cutscenes. To me, games like Dark Souls have a strong narrative. They're subtle, but they're strong. Lots of backbone, but never feels too complicated, at least not to me, because you only have to get as involved in it as you want to. In the end, in my opinion, Generation Zero actually ended up having a pretty weak narrative. It's not so much subtle as it is basically not fucking there at all. You get a few hints here or there, and there's clearly an intended sense of mystery to the whole thing, but that only keeps you going for so long. As you go through the story, you learn very little of what is actually going on. After 8 to 10 hours of play, I still barely knew anything about the situation, which means that all I really got out of that experience was half of a real day's worth of wandering through the countryside shooting robots. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but on its own it just makes for a very shallow experience. If I was into modding in any way, and, was capable and was playing on a PC, I'd try and modify the game to actually have some sort of story mode or something. I mean, I know it technically has one, but it just feels that having more of a story could have made this a lot better. They wouldn't have even needed to add NPCs or anything like that, because the feeling of isolation is important to the tone. Just have some story beats and paste them in the game a little better. It also would have been nice if the different settlements and houses that you came across had some stories hidden away as well. There's kind of a few, but nothing quite like the homes and stuff you find in games like the Fallout series. You're not going to find a heartbreaking story or some sort of dramatic moment by wandering around, and you're most likely going to find some random resources that you may or may not need, and that you've likely found 400 times before you got to this place. That's the biggest downfall of Generation Zero as a single player experience, and probably as a multiplayer one as well. The world is just dead. There's no people, which you could totally do in a game, but you have to replace the lack of people with something else, like a sense that people were there once beyond, oh, there are clothes left on the floor. Some sort of story, people who were looking for other people, or some sort of horrible death scene. You know the kind of thing I'm talking about. All of the vaults in Fallout. Pretty much anything that happens in The Witcher, but without the people being there, I guess. It's not really the point I'm trying to make here. There's not really much of anything going on anywhere in this game. Combine that with an insanely huge map with about 3 different types of house, 1 vehicle type, and insanely long walk times, and you've basically got a walking simulator with added robot shootouts. Which, I'll admit, would have made Dear Esther better, but not insanely so. So, to answer the question of whether it's worth playing this game solo, the answer is probably not for most people. If you want a game that you can play while letting your brain shut off and listening to your favourite podcasts, then you might be in luck here, but you might as well go and play Euro Truck Simulator or Elite Dangerous. For everyone else, there are infinitely better options going. I just really hope that this doesn't put anyone else off turning Tales from the Loop into a video game, or at least using the style and aesthetic, because this could have been so incredible if it had been done right. As it stands, you're just better off playing something else to relax. If you find yourself getting bored, you can always switch over to the last few minutes of iRobot in a few minutes. It's basically the same experience. Thanks for watching, everyone. A massive thank you to everyone who has subscribed over the past couple of weeks. We finally hit over 100 subs, so I'm going to do something needlessly over the top to celebrate it. So, stick around for that. You can also check out some of our other content too, if you're feeling adventurous. I'm going to go now, because I've been staring at robots for so long that I see them when I close my eyes.